Hi, my name is Hannah. Welcome back to my channel. I have read some very interesting books that I am excited to talk about, so welcome to another book wrap-up. Let's jump into that. So I read the book River of the Gods, Genius, Courage, and Betrayal in the Search for the Source of the Nile by Candace Millard. This book is following two British men who were trying to find the source of the Nile, and it's very colonialist. It's, look, I found this lake and it is mine now and I name it Victoria and I own it because I discovered it. And it's like, oh my gosh. But you know, this book was written recently, and so I feel like the author took great care in trying to show a broad perspective of what these men did in their lives, as well as introduce people that may not have been talked about in earlier narratives of these stories. The third man that worked in the discovering of the source of the Nile was Sidi Mubarak Bombay, and he was enslaved and at a young age, and when the man who purchased him died, he eventually traveled back to Africa, and really, he was the one who knew the local terrain, who did all the discovering, who was the guide, basically. So it was really interesting to learn about him, his life, and how, of course, these British men are saying, yes, this is my discovery, but it really was this guy. It was an interesting portrait, good and bad, of the men that searched for the source of the Nile. And I thought the author did a really good job at not being just, one-sided in the narrative. She really tried to show these people as multidimensional people. They weren't just amazing explorer conquerors, but they also weren't horrible monsters. They were complex people who lived in their time, and she gave us a very good look at these people. So I thought it was a really interesting book. At parts, going through some of those old journals and what happened, I thought it might have been a little dry, but overall, a really well done book. Now, Dia over at Novel iDeea suggested that I try reading The 10,000 Doors of January by Alex E. Harrow. So this book is following our main character, January, and it has some magic. There's doors that are portals to other worlds, and she has this book that is telling her about them, and she's kind of in danger, and it's magical and it's fun, and I really did enjoy this book. It really kind of had that sweep you away, make you feel like there's magic around the corner kind of vibes. So I really enjoyed it. I think my biggest complaint, though, with this book is a complaint I've had with other books by Alex E. Harrow. I really loved the Once and Future Witches, but I also read A Spindle Splintered by her as well. And I feel like that book really had some interesting ideas, but it just didn't give it the right time and the pacing to really, it didn't have enough time devoted to really flesh out the ideas that it needed to. And so I really liked The 10,000 Doors of January. I think it did a better job than A Spindle Splintered in fleshing out a lot of those ideas, but the end felt a little rushed. And by the end, I was like, oh, wait, now what's happening? This is going on. And I thought that maybe the pacing was off, and I think she just needed to slow down and maybe give it a little more time. I wouldn't have minded if this book was a little longer, if I really felt like all the plot lines that she introduced were better explored. I did enjoy reading it. So I read this book because of the recommendation of Scott at Gunpowder Fiction and Plot, and I don't think this is a book that I normally would have picked up, but I'm really glad I picked it up. So I read Comfort Me with Apples by Catherine M. Valente. And I don't want to say a ton about it because I don't want to give it away, but we kind of start out our story with Sophie, who just has this perfect husband. She has this perfect life, and she lives in this perfect community. And but something darker is going on underneath. And it was kind of that thriller horror kind of thing. What it made me think of was the story Bluebeard, and I kept kind of thinking it was like a Bluebeard retelling, and so I wasn't really looking in the right place for some of the reveal later on, and I thought it was really well done, and it had a lot of like feminist women's issues that were discussed in it, and it just is one of those books that, yeah, it's supposed to be kind of creepy and what's going on next, but really it stuck with me, and I keep thinking about it, thinking about the end, thinking about how it was set up and the meanings behind things and the symbolism and those kinds of things. It just kind of like stuck in my head. So I wouldn't say this is like everybody should read it, but also if you read it, please talk to me about it, because it just is, it's one of those books that's gonna just like be scratching the inside of my brain for a long time. Really glad I picked it up, just because it has its moments of being creepy and suspenseful, but also just like, whoa, things to think about. So I heard about this next book from the channel Gem of Books, so I'll make sure to link her channel down below, and I listened to This Is Going to Hurt: Secret Diaries of a Junior Doctor by Adam Kay. And I enjoyed this. This is a doctor in the NHS. He found his old journals from when he was a junior doctor, and he published them, basically. He, you know, edited, compiled, put together. And in some ways, it's that fun read of, oh, the juicy medical stories, who put what where, what's going on, you know, there's some of that, the crazy medical stories. So you can, you know, laugh or just enjoy the crazy stories. But really, it was interesting because he talks a lot about like his own mental health and how doctors are put through, especially in England, like they're put through so much. They have such high expectations and not, you know, proper compensation, proper support, mental health resources, those types of things. And that's what eventually led him to leave the profession. And so by the end, it's basically like an impassioned letter of, we need to do things to support these doctors because the NHS does good work and these doctors need more support and more help so that they can put up with these kinds of stressors. And so I thought that it had some meaningful things in it and was also just an enjoyable read. It had some horrible sadness and difficulties, as you can imagine. A story about a doctor, you can definitely imagine there's some, you know, life and death situations. And so if any of that bothers you, I don't think you'd like this, but it also had those funny stories and a little bit of that dark humor, dealing with the stress of a really difficult job through making light of difficult situations. And so I thought it was a fun read, and it's something that I think is an important topic. Now, do I live in the UK? No. Do I live in Europe? Yeah. So, I mean, I'd be interested to know more about my health system here, and I'd be interested to know how, like, the doctor's feelings in the UK compare with doctors in the United States, because I know the compensation is very different. And so, I mean, it is very specific to location and time, but I thought that it was a very interesting read and definitely worth picking up. Those are the books that I read the last week or so. If you have read any of these books and have thoughts on them, please let me know in the comments down below, and I should be back soon with another book wrap up.